So open up your iPhone camera, press down like you're creating a photo, but swipe to the left. I bet you didn't know that's how you create a burst of photos using the iPhone camera. Another thing I bet you didn't know, if you want to create a long exposure, make a photo in live mode and then hit the button in the top left, swipe down to long exposure, and now you have a long exposure image. And I bet you didn't know that when the camera is in timer, you actually create a burst of photos that you can go into and select which one you like the best. And a quick shout out and thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. See, that's the thing with iPhones. Most people have them, but few really know how to use them and get the most out of them. So today we're going to go over how to get professional results using your iPhone, like these photos that I made. Now, some backstory on my experience with mobile photography. My personal opinion is that these cameras continue to advance, but there are circumstances where you're not going to get the same result as a DSLR or a mirrorless, and that's completely okay. But smartphone cameras are getting to the point where you can get exceptional results with these cameras, so much so that an iPhone photo actually made it into my new book, which if you told me 5 years ago that a mobile photo would be published in a book, I wouldn't believe you. So it's really cool how far these cameras have come, and I'm using the iPhone 15 Pro. I recently upgraded from my iPhone 13 Pro, which is broken and beat up. First thing we got to go over is camera settings. So what we're going to do is go into settings, we're going to click on camera, and the first thing we're going to do is click on formats. Now in formats, we're going to toggle on Pro RAW and resolution control. The reason you want to do that is this allows you to capture RAW files using the iPhone. RAW files are what all professionals use because you have more control over the photos in editing. Two examples of this are the dynamic range in the sensor on the iPhones, as well as adjustments to your white balance. Now the next setting to check out under formats is your camera capture. You have high efficiency and most compatible. Now according to Apple, most compatible is best if you're using JPEGs, but we're shooting in RAW, so it doesn't really matter. I'll let you decide. In my opinion, there's no real difference between the two of these. I like to keep mine on high efficiency just because I use the phone for video as well, and Apple notes that high efficiency works better with video. Now the next step is to click back and go into your camera settings and click on preserve settings. Now in preserve settings, what we are going to toggle on is Pro RAW and resolution control. The reason we want to do that is if you're out making pictures and you're shooting in Pro RAW, once you select Pro RAW on, it will stay on for the duration of your photo outing. Now clicking out once again back to our camera settings, I personally like to turn the grid on for my photos. It just helps me line up compositions and see what I'm doing more clearly. And from there, when you scroll down, you want to go ahead and turn off prioritize faster shooting. By turning off prioritizing faster shooting, you are going to have image quality be the best it can be every single time. This can slow down your camera a little bit, but in the sake of today's video, we're looking to get the best result possible. So not having the phone adapt image quality to rapidly pressing the shutter, which is the note Apple has for this setting, makes a whole lot of sense if the best result is what you're looking for. So now that we got that out of the way, let's jump into the camera controls just so you can gain some understanding of how to use this properly. Now we already talked about the importance of shooting RAW and having your settings preserved. So in the top right corner, you can go ahead and click RAW Max on, and now you are capturing RAW photos with your iPhone. Now, next to RAW is going to be Live Photo. When you turn Live Photo on, you turn RAW off. So that little trick I showed you earlier with long exposure, that only works if you're shooting in JPEGs. The next thing you want to know is this little arrow at the top of the camera. By clicking that arrow, you now gain more access to controls on the phone. You can adjust your aspect ratio to square or 16:9, but if you're shooting RAW, when you import the RAW photos, this change to your aspect ratio won't happen. Now another great setting to be aware of here is your exposure compensation. If you are in a situation where maybe the phone is automatically over or under exposing your image, you can click on this plus and minus and toggle your exposure up and down. When you do this, now every photo you make is going to have this exposure adjustment made to it. Now let's say you're in a situation where you just want to one-off change your exposure. What you can do is click on your screen. This is going to set your focus point, and then you can drag your finger down from that focus point and it's going to drop your exposure, or if you bring your finger up, it's going to raise your exposure. Now, one other thing you can do with your finger control on the screen is by clicking and holding on the screen, you are going to lock in your autofocus point. So if you move the camera around, it's still going to focus on what you set that focus point to. So now let's talk about all the things to be aware of with all the different camera options on the iPhone. One of the big marketing gimmicks, I have to say, with the iPhone 15 Pro is the fact that you have all these different camera lenses, when in reality, you still just have the 3 main camera lenses, one for macro, one for standard, and one for zoom. But iPhones do now have the ability to tap on the one and you get a 28mm and a 35mm, but in my testing, it didn't seem like this did anything. It's just something that Apple is trying to do to make the product seem more exciting. But in my experience, you're going to get the best result using the native camera at its native focal length, which is 24mm. When it comes to things like macro, one way you can get better photos with macro is basically doing 2 things that all professional macro photographers do. One is paying attention to your light, and 2 is paying attention to your focus. Just because you have a phone doesn't mean the rules of macro photography don't apply to you. It's not magic. So if you want to get good macro photos, I definitely recommend having a very well lit scene where your subject is facing your light source. And on top of that, you want to make sure that your camera is stable when you're creating macro photos. Now, in the past, I've been extremely critical of the iPhone ultra-wide lens as well as the zoom lens. And the reason for that criticism was I always felt the standard focal length was so far ahead of these other 2 lenses. It felt like ultra-wide and zoom were more marketing tools and more fun things to use rather than real creative tools. But with the iPhone 15 Pro, that has completely changed. This is the best ultra wide and best zoom lens I've ever used on a mobile device. It's so good I had a hard time distinguishing between photos made with this and my Leica SL2. The only thing that gave it away is the loss in resolution when you crop to extreme amounts. I mean, you really have to crop these images to even begin to notice. And that is what I would say to anyone looking to get a professional result using these 2 lenses. If you want to use ultra wide or zoom, try to avoid extreme cropping because the resolution on the iPhone is still not as good as a mirrorless or DSLR, but it's really good. So if you're creating full-size images and you're not trying to print the size of a billboard, you should be completely fine, especially if you're shooting in RAW. Now, speaking of shooting in RAW and limitations, the portrait mode on the iPhone 15 Pro still does not have RAW capabilities, meaning if you use portrait mode, you have to shoot as a JPEG, and for me, that makes this a feature that is still not as good as a professional camera. In my opinion, you're better off using a lens that's actually built for a low aperture depth of field type photo. The bokeh is going to look better because it's not added digitally. It's going to be smoother, but if you're someone who only has an iPhone and it's your only option, I recommend with portrait mode just dialing it back a little bit, using it sparingly and not going overboard. And if you do that based on the test with the iPhone 15 Pro, you're going to get a stellar result. These are the best portrait mode photos I've ever seen, and it's a big improvement from previous iPhone models that I really disliked portrait mode on. So now we got to talk about how I edit my iPhone images as a professional photographer. Now, speaking of editing, this is a great time to thank the sponsor on today's video, Squarespace. If you are someone who has bought my presets from evanranf.com, you should have received an email because I created an update that now allows you to edit iPhone RAW files using all my presets. And thanks to Squarespace, I have the ability to contact everyone who uses my presets, keep a mailing list, as well as sell those presets and my photo books and my prints to anyone who's interested in them. And if you're starting a photography business, even if you're just using an iPhone, building a website is the easiest way to take your business to the next level, and no one makes it as easy as Squarespace using their drag and drop templates. I built my website, evanranf.com, in one afternoon, and I have multiple videos on this channel breaking down exactly how you can do the same thing. If you're looking to sell digital products like presets, I have a video for you, linked in the description down below. If you're trying to build a portfolio that looks professional, guess what? I got a video for you there. I also have a video where I break down how to build an automated system, so when people find you on Instagram or social media, they can download a free product and then be automatically emailed a promotion to potentially buy your paid product. And guess what? That video is linked in the description on this video as well. So you can go to squarespace.com/evanranf, start a free trial, follow one of those videos, build yourself a site, and when you're ready to sign up, you can use code evanranf to save 10% at checkout. That's squarespace.com/evanranf, start a free trial, and use code evanranf to save 10% at checkout. So for editing on the iPhone, there's 2 main apps that I love to use, and it's basically all I use on the phone. The first is Lightroom Mobile. I love this because it emulates the workflow that I have on my computer in Lightroom and brings it to mobile, and I can edit my photos the exact same way I normally would, literally anywhere. And from there, once I import my photos, I'm going to crop the image because, like I mentioned, all of Apple's RAW files are the same size. So if this is going to be an Instagram story, I have to crop crop it to 16:9. Now from here I would click on light and I can make any of my basic adjustments, things like exposure, contrast, shadows, highlights. Now next to it you can click on color, and from there you can make your basic color adjustments, things like tint, your white balance, your vibrance, and your saturation. But up in the top right corner you can click on grading or mix. So let's start with grading. When you click on grading, you have the ability to tone the shadows, midtones, and highlights of your image. This is a great way to give your photos a custom look and do something that most apps don't allow you to do so easily. So next to grading is color mix, and what color mix allows you to do is make changes to individual color channels. So notice how when I click on orange, when I make an adjustment to the hue, the color of my hand changes, and when I make an adjustment to the saturation and the luminance, my hand changes as well. But this goes a step further by Adobe giving you a selection tool. So what you can do is you can click this little dot above all the colors and bring that dot over any piece of the image and make adjustments to the saturation, luminance, and the hue by swiping up and down on the screen. This is great because it changes multiple color channels at once to give you exactly what you're looking for based on what selection you make in your image. Now that is a more professional tool, and another professional tool that I love to use is masking. So I go over to mask, I click the plus sign, and I can add in a brush, a linear gradient, or a radial gradient. Let me show you how these work. You just swipe up and create a gradient on your image, and with that gradient you can now make adjustments like you would any other piece of the photo, but it only impacts what's highlighted in red. So if we click on light, we can change the exposure, we can change our highlights, and we can do the same thing with color as well. We can adjust our white balance, we can adjust our saturation, and it only affects the piece of the image that we've selected with that mask. Now what I like to do to edit my photos is use my presets. I loaded these into Lightroom Mobile from Lightroom on the computer. If you have presets you like to use, I recommend doing the same thing. Mine allow me to add a base preset as well as all the modifiers that I typically use to speed up my workflow. Now from there, I'm going to go ahead and export this photo, save a copy to my device, and I'm going to open the next app I use, which is Touch Retouch. Now this is an app that allows you to easily retouch from your phone. All we got to do is load our image in, click on brush, and now we can zoom in on our image and remove any unwanted pieces from the photo. It's an awesome tool that I use all the time for any image that's showing up on my social media. I believe this is one of the most important steps you can take as a photographer. Now from here, we'll go ahead and click on save, and we're going to save a copy, and we also want to make sure our format is set to max 100, and that is all I do typically for 99% of the photos I edit on my phone. So there we go. That's how to use your iPhone like a professional photographer. Now, if you enjoyed the edits in today's video and you want to replicate them, you can go to evanramp.com and pick up my presets. Now, my presets are different than anyone else on the internet because I created a modular system where I can give you the formulas for edits in YouTube videos like this one, as well as my social media on Instagram and X, formerly Twitter. You'll see me post formulas after photo sets. You'll see in these videos the formulas in the bottom left corner of images. That is for you to follow along and replicate the looks using my presets and get long-term value from them. It's not necessary to get good edits, but it speeds up my workflow a lot, and it can speed up yours too. And you can cheat by just copying the workflow that I use on whatever image you're trying to create. So that's it for me today. I'm gonna make more videos about this once I use it a little bit longer. I didn't want to be one of these people who just jumped on the internet and made a video about the iPhone 2 days after using it, because even recording this video, I learned a lot about what it's capable of. So probably a month or so from now, I'll make a street photography video and a long-term review. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe so you can catch it, and thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. See y'all in the next one.